Welcome to Seymour's World. This is Seymour Kazimirski speaking to you from Vancouver, Canada. Before we start with our guest for today, I want to give you a few comments I received regarding our last week's guest, Konstantin Kostin from St. Petersburg in Russia. Most of the comments were extremely favorable regarding the business climate in St. Petersburg and in Russia. Regarding the issues of Sochi, he really was adamant about the negative publicity that he had received or that we had given him from the United States regarding the Sochi Olympics. And he felt he wanted to clear up one fact, and that is that the actual amount spent on the Sochi Olympics, $9 billion. The rest was spent of the $53 billion. The rest was spent on the infrastructure around and about the Sochi Olympics. So let's get on with today's guest. Today in Vancouver, I am at the last door with Dave Pavios. Dave, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I have been researching addiction centers, especially because I wanted to open one up in Hawaii. And I felt that of all the centers that I had looked at as a business for Hawaii, I felt that none of them seemed to fit what I felt was a community-type setting. And when we came to the last door, I said, you have something special. So let's start from the beginning. How did the last door come to be?
Grassroots beginning, out of necessity. In the 80s, if somebody wanted to do or to get into recovery, it was either expensive or difficult, and there wasn't much. It was mainly outpatient counseling, and that works fine, but it doesn't work fine when you don't have anywhere to live, or where this is a paradox where you have somewhere to live, but you can't stay clean from one counseling session to the next. And a therapeutic community or a recovery house, you want to bring in as many values that are like normal living. So while you're in treatment, you're in the community, you're still part of regular life. So after a period of stabilization, we used to get guys sober, get them off drugs, get them not living in addiction, more than just drugs and alcohol, but living well, sleeping at night, eating, exercising, feeling better, and then we would send them to treatment. And we did that for years while we developed our program. And, the guys would come back out of treatment, and they would stay a while, and they would give back to the newer guys coming in. So it created a real, family atmosphere, real positive energy. The new guys who were, in some cases, quite sick and struggling would be inspired by these guys who had a bit of clean time and had resolved some issues. And, after a while, we developed our own program where we wanted to use not just that approach, we wanted to use the whole community. And like every aspect, from the coffee shop to the swimming pool to how the guys are in the community, is a reflection of the program. So when a new guy comes in, I never bring in 20 guys at a time. I bring in a couple guys at a time always. It's always ongoing. And those guys are coming into an environment that's, pretty positive. And, like to say it's probably 90% about recovery and 10% about addiction. And we want them to, learn about recovery and not so much, even if you could figure out why addiction is the way it is, even if you had the answer, I think most addicts I meet, even if you gave them the answer, they would still use. They just get caught up in it. You get used to it, and you can get used to being depressed. You can get used to being angry. You just sort of accept that's the way you are. And addiction's like that. And I think anger and depression and fear and anxiety are all supporting factors in addiction. I don't think it's actually just a physical drug. Like we have guys stop smoking cigarettes here. A guy will come in, he smoked for 30 years. He quits the day he comes here. And I haven't had a guy tell me after 4 days, I can't believe how good I feel. If you're in an environment where nobody's smoking, you go through the physical withdrawal in probably 4 days. The psychological part, takes a few weeks, but if you're supported and it's positive and you're eating, and we've got a lot of hills here in New Westminster, so if the guy quickly notices he can walk up these hills without having to sit down 5 times, you know, stuff like that.
So that's part of their exercise regime. They figure it out real quick. Dave, when we talk about the psychology and the physiology of addiction, there are many, many centers that I have been to where they believe it's one or the other, that it's a psychological issue or it's a physiological issue. You don't seem to think that way. You think there's a balance between the two. What is your theory behind it?
Wow, psychological, physical, like mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. It's a little bit of all of it. If you ask, you know, guys why they use, you get every answer. There's every reason. And here's one that, you know, I went to treatment myself a few times, and one that was never addressed was that I like to do drugs. I like to be loaded. I like to drink. And as a matter of fact, when I was in treatment, I was working on what I call the car crash days. I mean, it's obvious you have an addiction problem the day you crash the car, get the impaired, your key to your own house don't fit no more, the bank's empty, you know, the gambling binge, all of it that is addiction. That's an obvious day. A gambler will walk out of a casino and want to jump off a bridge on the way home. That's obvious addiction. But what I realized was addiction was the everyday stuff. And in truth, I wanted to get loaded on good days, happy days. I like to celebrate, you know. So no one ever asked me in treatment, like, what do you do when you're happy? Well, I get loaded. I drink. I try not to drink too much. I try to control it. Every gambler tries to control it. Every alcoholic will it. So you stop. There has to be a point. I heard a reverend in San Antonio, Texas one time talk about the difference between stopping and slowing down, and described a bunch of circumstance where how many times in your life where you just slow things down and you always go back. And it made sense to me. And that kind of logic fit into recovery was once you've stopped, like smoking cigarettes, which it's funny, a guy could be coming off heroin or alcohol or any other drug, and it's funny, when they're coming off nicotine, they don't get cravings for heroin and alcohol, just the nicotine. Pretty powerful. But 4 or 5 days into it, the physical part is over. With some other drugs, it's a little longer. It takes time. But you get to that spot where it's over. And if they're eating, sleeping, being healthy, stimulated to, you know, take responsibility and be involved, they get caught up in, like here it's guys, right? It's like a ball team. So it's positive peer group pressure. So they get involved in that positive energy, and they're doing better than they know. So it you know, enables you to make change. So my idea is to do recovery, to just stop using. I mean, it accomplishes nothing. You know, you have to change.
I understand. The one of the issues about the word change is obviously it surrounds you. Everybody here has to change. I'd love to be on a diet and lose that 25 pounds I said I would lose, you know, work on it and be sure that I can do. I have to change my lifestyle. I have to change my habits. When an addict comes through your door, do you have a pro forma of what has to happen with that person, or is each one an individual and you have to treat each of them individually? Do you have a plan that says this is the way you could become a recovering addict rather than an addict?
Both. Okay. If a guy's first time in treatment, we approach it a certain way. You know, we realize he doesn't understand the language, doesn't know what we're talking about. We get to know them a little bit to see where their values are. And if somebody was raised with values, the first step in recovery is to get them back to those values. While they're you know, that's kind of a strange way to put it.
No, but I understand it.
Yeah.
You're saying basically that if somebody has basic values that they brought up with honesty, trust, you know, trusting, all of those basic issues, then if you can bring them back to those issues, you've got a good beginning. But do you tear them down to go? Do you bring them down to get to that issue, or is the past, and now we're working on the present and the future?
Well, they do some writing on the past. They share about it, but it isn't to break. I mean, they already broke down enough. It'd be like one of those questions about, you know, what's the bottom? When is it enough? And I think it's enough when you decide you're going to do something about it, and then get help and get support. And You know, like if I sit down with a guy who's detoxing and I talk about dignity, integrity, and morality, I don't think he's going to get it. You know what I mean? I'm going to talk to him about resting up and stopping the damage and becoming a part of a community and make a couple of friends and, you know, let's get you a sandwich and get you started, right? And then after a guy's been here a little while, then when he's in the environment and he's around other guys that are practicing those character assets, all of a sudden the conversation's there. Well, you know, what's it like living in guilt and regret? Okay, now in one way that's the past, but in the other way it's how would you like to have some dignity, integrity, and morality? So it's always the flow, moving it over there. So if somebody talks about, you know, the things that get them into addiction, it's always to move them in a new direction.
So there's no silver bullet. There's not one way of somebody coming in here, whether they're a new patient, you call them clients, I understand, whether they're a new client or they relapsed several times before, not every single one of them has the same path to follow.
No, different timelines. I always get asked about how long is it going to take, and if I'm talking to
that was my next question, actually. Go ahead.
I always answer that with it's open-ended. If a guy says to me, I'm only going to do 30 days, I'll go, well, let's do 30 days. And if he gets well by 30 days, he's going to know that he needs a little bit more, and then he's in on the decision. Sometimes if there's, I call this leverage, but if it's for the courts or for a job or, you know, there's enough circumstance, there's enough consequences to actually stop somebody, the same process still applies. Because if I said to that guy, you're going to be here for 6 months, I don't think he's going to think that's completely insane. He thinks he's going to jail or a mental institution. But if you go with an open timeline and you include the person in the decision, you feel better, you think clearer, then you make better choices. And by 30-day mark, it's pretty rare that a guy's not saying, like, some guys look at me and go, you tricked me, which I don't mind, whatever it takes, right? And they're feeling a little bit better, and they make that choice. And then sometimes I've seen guys go month by month by month until they get what they need out of this, and other guys will just surrender. So that's really where you figure out what the bottom is. I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to be like that. Mm-hmm. And then they invest in the decision to get well rather than it just be imposed on them, right? And it can take time. Some guys will do it in a month. Some guys will do it in 6.
I have to say to our audience that it's important to realize that the last door is not out on a ranch somewhere or in the middle of the woods. It's actually part of the community here in New Westminster, British Columbia. And that's very interesting because the places that I have looked at, even in Hawaii, which we know Habilitat is our most successful recovery center there, and places in Washington State I've looked at, and in Minnesota that I've looked at, they all seem to believe that putting their clients in or outside a city center is really key. And I call it the isolation recovery system. And I'm not sure that you believe in that, Dave, based on what I see here. I think it's important that we talk about that a little bit. And I want Dave to describe the door and his philosophy behind the door itself as a business, because this is a business and he's got to make money, although his heart is truly in the recovery business itself, which means here's a man who I've met, and I see now such a commitment to helping others, and it's got to come from the system that he has evolved here at the Last Door. So we're going to go to break. This is Seymour Kazimirski at Seymour's World. We'll be back in a minute with Dave Pavlus here in Vancouver, British Columbia at the Last Door. Thank you.
Castle and Cook, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics, empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company, and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The Scheidler Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including Think Tank.
Welcome back to Seymour's World with Seymour Kazimirski and Dave Pavlus from The Last Door here in Vancouver, British Columbia. It has been an amazing journey for me coming to Vancouver and understanding a little bit more about Dave's philosophy and why The Last Door has been so successful in helping recovering addicts. So Dave, let's talk a little bit about the door itself. When did you start it? You're a very young man, so I need to understand how it all happened.
It had already started as a recovery house, safe living, go to treatment. And I was early in recovery myself, back to work. And somebody suggested that I come out here and volunteer. It would help me stay clean. And so my kids were really young. I didn't want them to grow up in Vancouver, in the city. I wanted to get out a little. So we moved to Queensboro, which is in this area. Got a little 4-acre farm and dogs and dirt bikes, and I started volunteering here. So I was working in the Arctic at the time on the winter roads, and eventually I didn't want to be away from my kids. I wanted to be home more. So I made enough money that I volunteered more than I worked, and I got hooked. I call it the coffee and the conversation. It's a thing I remember about, Bill Wilson and Alcoholics Anonymous. It's go for coffee, the coffee and the conversation. And I have the same idea that, recovery sometimes is simple as that. It's a guy can do therapy, he can do treatment, he can have breakthroughs, he can have moments of clarity. But I tell you what, some days without that coffee and the conversation, none of that other stuff. And so, I like to slow things down to have that conversation. And as a person does recovery and the defenses go down, it really happens. So for me, I was here as a volunteer, and the guy that was running it was going to close it down. He didn't want to do it anymore. It was too hard. There was no support. There was no finances. It was just too much. And I don't know. I said, I had a couple bucks. I said, I'll buy it off you. Because I think a guy should have his own treatment center if he wants to.
Well, I would say that you probably know it all by then, right?
So I was busy. So we signed some papers. I took over. It was pretty rough. It's funny, too, because about a month after I took it over, some of the guys were really rebelling because I wanted to create change. And they were talking about how it was so much better when the other guy had it. And I'm like, you're eating steak and cake, and the energy's changing. But they wanted to, didn't want to change, right? And I had a little turnover in guys, and, the energy started to change. And, it doesn't take much. It's not the outside stuff that makes recovery. I remember sitting in that driveway, and that was like an old house. And, there were times we were so poor back then. This is one of those poor stories. We were so poor, we had to make a decision. It's either 3 good meals or 3 bad ones or 2 good ones. So we voted in 2 good ones, But that energy was there. I remember going home at night, and just feeling good about what I was doing with the time I had. And I just got hooked. After a while, I didn't go up north anymore. And I ran it as a business. Broke even, didn't make a dime, didn't lose a dime for about 2.5, 3 years. And then we developed a nonprofit society and started working together, and I turned it over to them. And they hired me on a contract to work here and develop a program. So for, a lot of years it wasn't just that stabilizing process. And the treatment centers I sent my guys to loved it. Because a lot of guys, they'll get loaded right till the day they get to treatment. Like they literally fall through the front door. They're on medication, they're loaded, and they're sick and detoxing, and they're not really there. And so they liked it when we stabilized people. They would prefer my guys. So my guys would go to treatment. They'd be group ready, self-esteem, sharp, right? Like alive again. And if you take pictures of them when I meet them, and then 3 months later take a picture, it looks like, like a zombie in those Dead films into back to life. You'd never think that was the same guy. And so after a while, we started developing our program. the 28-day treatment centers, they stayed the same. But we bought more into the community idea that there was a few guys that didn't want to go to treatment. They wanted to stay here. They liked this community so much. And I was like, hey, it's just a choice. So they stayed. And what I noticed after, this took 5 years, but after 5 years, some of the guys who stayed did better than the other guys. And the only thing I could really, attribute that to is the community, the sense of ownership of this place. Like, this was their house. Guys would say things like, I got my heart back. Guys that were married, they'd be dating their wives, and they'd say things to me like, I'm falling in love with my wife again. And I think that's just coming back to life, because you get so oppressed in addiction that, one day you look in the mirror, you're not you anymore. And people that are passionate, they're not passionate, they're afraid and stuff like that, right?
If I get back to the time frame again, is there a time frame for that, or is the treatment plan? You said it varies for each individual, but do you have trigger points? Do you have milestones that tell you, I'm a businessman, so with me everything is dollars and cents and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any time frames like that that says if somebody doesn't do this by 90 days or 30 days? No, is that?
Well, my counselors do a bit of that. I don't.
Okay.
I don't work on the clock at all. Like, what would it take for a spiritual awakening? And what I meant by a spiritual awakening is really getting your heart involved. For some guys, that happens pretty quick. By 3 months, they're ready to go back to work, and we'll do outpatient with them. We'll help them integrate into the community. The longest I ever had was a guy. Walter stayed with us 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
He'd done 31 years in prison. He was the nicest guy. Back in the day, he got busted with 1 cap of heroin. Did 15 years. Okay, think about how out of touch he is with the world. When he got out, he got arrested again for something. And when it was all said and done, he had done 31 years in prison. So he stayed with us for over 2.5 years, but not in the sense of being institutionalized. It was a complete process. It took so long to integrate him into the community. And then eventually, to help him out, we give him a job. And then when we moved to Moudia, it was his first place he'd ever had in his life, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And Walter stayed clean, for the rest of his life. He's passed now, but, you couldn't put that on a timeline, right? And the thing about being a stakeholder here is much for my staff, all the staff that work for me here, like, this is theirs. Like, they take pride, take ownership, they're involved. Like, there's no smoking. None of my staff smoke. Like, that's how we make that idea work. They're invested in the idea. Danny does jiu-jitsu. There's camping and hiking, and they're all involved in that. And so that ownership and that being a stakeholder in this, like that, works its way down to the clients as well. They're not just here. After a while, it's theirs. When they're walking back from the meeting, they're saying, like, I'm going home. And then even they'll say to me, wow, I can't believe I said that. But what you realize sometimes is a guy who has a good home, wife and kids, a guy will drive down the driveway, sit in the driveway, and he's not even part of his own house anymore. So while they're here, they find that home feeling, and then when they go home, it goes with them.
How many clients have come through the door?
Thousands.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's been 30 years.
And it took me a long time to find you, because I went to all the big ones, the centers that charge $30,000 a month, or some in California. They're quite famous for who they are, but I didn't find the success rate, or what I thought was a success rate, acceptable based on the cost and based on their program. We're going to get into that. We have another break coming up. I just want everybody to know that we are with Dave Pavlus at the Last Door in Vancouver, Canada. Actually, it's not Vancouver. It's New Westminster, which is a suburb of Vancouver. Today, for those of you in Hawaii, so that you do feel bad for me, it is freezing cold out there. It is raining cats and dogs, and I'm sitting inside dreading that I'm going to have to leave here in a minute. So we will be back after this break. Thank you very much. It's Seymour's World, Seymour Kazimirski.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to Seymour's World with Seymour Kazimirski. We are in Vancouver with Dave Pavios at the Last Door, where I think, after a lot of research, is one of the best addiction recovery centers I've seen. I have looked at many of them across the United States, mainly because I want to open one up in Hawaii, as if I don't have enough to do, as most of you know. And I just think it's important to have the right one. That's why I've been doing so much research. So, Dave, one of the comments that I've heard from a lot of the people who are here, your clients as well as your staff, is that everybody gives back. Everybody feels that part of their recovery is to give back. You don't hear that too much in any other business that I'm involved in. Most of them want to retire, they want to get out of the business. But in your business, everybody seems to want to give back. Explain the theory behind it. How do you teach it?
Top to bottom. So here's a philosophy. The house don't run if the dishes ain't done. That's simplicity, right?
Okay, that's as simple as it gets.
Because it won't really, if you think about it. I mean, like on that end. So a new guy walks through the door, the guys meet him, greet him, they take care of him. They help him settle in. I might not even assess him for a little bit. Other times we'll do an interview. It might take a week of conversations and getting to know somebody if they're, have fears or anxieties about doing this. Sometimes we talk on the phone for months. Once somebody's here, I mean, it's kind of strange, but I'll tell the guy the first thing you're going to learn to do is help the guy beside you, because it'll make you well. I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense, but it does, because what we're trying to cure, and anybody that has an addict in their life will know this, there's two things that drive you crazy. Number one is all the lies. Number two is the self-centeredness. So they can lie to me all day. It's not going to break my heart. You know what I mean? But we get them practicing telling the truth, telling the real story. I call it the truth, and the truth. And they believe what they're saying when they come here. As soon as they get well, it's going to be a different story. As soon as they take responsibility, it's going to be a different story. But as soon as they start to, take care, like they get a little well, and they take care of that next guy coming through the door, making sure he got what he needs, and he's okay, and they take him out in the community, the guy who's taking him out starts getting well. The guy who's going out, it isn't a bunch of authority. It's not a bunch of rules that are going to make him well. We're not marching them around we help them belong in this community. So in the house, we make sure they're fed, got somewhere to sleep, everything's good, they're clean, comfortable, that they're being affected by the recovery. And it starts to change things. I got guys who come here, I just had a guy come here, he's 25 years clean from Riverside, California. And Ron comes up and he does some tile work for me. And I try to pay him, he gets mad at me. It's like my house. He won't do it. He still has a key. 25 years. It's still his house. And when he walks in like he owns it. Like that.
What pride that is.
Yeah. And he stays connected with us. And anybody goes to California, they hook in with him and they get him to a meeting and they stay connected, and it means something.
And on that note, could we play a song which I believe one of your clients wrote? Yes, I would like to just play. We don't have to play the whole thing, Ian, but at least a few minutes of it, because I think it's an absolutely wonderful way of how he expresses what has happened with him here at the door. Could we do that?
That's suffering from addiction, I mean, it doesn't hurt to call. You don't have to have the rock bottom. You don't have to be on the street. Most of the addicts I meet aren't on the street. They still have houses and cars and jobs and moms and dads and everything on the outside, often looking not too bad. Once recovery started, it's a really holistic approach. It's about the solution, it's not about the problem, it's about getting better. And mental, emotional, physical healing, and then it's like going to a good hockey game, being part of a ball team, to celebrate and enjoy things.
You get what you've always got, doing what you've always done. The house don't run if the dishes ain't done. My problems weren't cheap. Now my moms can finally sleep. Well, old man Dan and the move of the day. Well, all the crazy new guys and the things they say. I'm waking up reading, well, just for today. The whistling in the meeting lets us know that we're late. And I've seen this room like 200 deep. On the edge of their seats to hear Pedro speak. And sometimes it almost feels like pretend. This life that I've been given and all of my friends. Feels good to know that you got my back. Because of you, we've got a few days. We're back to back. You're back to back. What life used to look like. We're broken and bruised, lost and confused, and hiding from the idea of something more. Then one day all this pain of remaining the same became greater than change, and I found myself at the last door. Stays on Friday, man, and seconds are up. Recount is on when the meeting erupts for clean time. I've waited such a long time to feel love. And it feels so good to come back and take back my life from what's mine and get back what I find. For so long I was blind, but finally I see tomorrow's not promised to me. Just for today, well, I can be free. Oh man, I'm free to be me. I'm free to be happy. I'm free to feel crappy. I'm free to laugh. I'm free to cry. And I've made amends. So I've got friends to tell me it'll be alright. Well, it'll be alright. 'Cause life used to look like we're broken and bruised, lost and confused, and hiding from the idea that there was something more. But then one day all this pain of remaining the same became greater than change, and I found myself at the last door. Won't forget the walks with Vic and the talks and the steps about making a new mistake from last night's cake, and getting second chances in this life to do things right. I've got to be something to someone tonight. Life used to look like broken and bruised, lost and confused. Then one day, the pain of remaining the same became greater than change. I found myself
Hi, wow, wasn't that amazing? That was The Door Boy. It was an amazing, amazing music video that came from a client here at the door. Dave, it's obvious your passion, your love of life, everything that you do is centered around the last door. And I'm assuming your family knows it and loves it as well because they seem to be part of it. We're going to have to take a break in a minute, but then I want to talk about why you keep doing this. Why is this such an important part of your life that you haven't retired yet and said, like the last guy who ran this place, I figured out how to do it, and now I'm ready to turn it over to somebody else. And yet, just in our conversation in the last hour, I see your passion is still there. It's probably as alive, if not more, than it was 30 years ago. We'll get back to that in a minute. This is Seymour Kazimirski at Seymour's World in Vancouver, Canada, at the last door. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Welcome back to Seymour's World. I'm Seymour Kazimirski. We're at the last door in Vancouver, Canada with Dave Pavios. What I think is probably one of the best recovery addiction centers I've seen throughout the United States, and I've studied several of them. Dave, after we've talked about the business side of it and the personal side of it, we have to talk about you. And this place revolves around you, which I really like. But at the same time, I see that most of the staff here take ownership of you call it the door, I call it the last door, but they take ownership of the door. And they really seem to want to do not what's a 9-to-5 job or even just help in recovery. What is the motivation for you to keep going with what you have, with what you've done here at the door?
Well, it keeps growing. We got new ideas all the time, so it stays interesting. I never get tired of that conversation. And you know, watching somebody have a spiritual awakening, you know, find love, be happy, because as they give it back, they share it. It's not like a private thing, it's a real open thing. And we tried an experiment one time. We were having guys go out to remote areas and do some recovery, light the fire and have the meetings, and it was pretty good, right? But it wasn't private. It was isolated. We started deciding that we still want to do some stuff like that, but we want it to be, you know, accessible, where you can come and go and be part of this. But our focus stayed here. And I did this thing, I thought I better do what's the cessation plan. So my staff, I used to do everything. And now I slowly gave it up over the years to where I've 25 staff who put their hearts into it and they're committed to it. And I do things like I pay for their education. I got a couple of youngsters going for their master's degree. I'm paying for that for them. That's an investment that comes back here tenfold, because on their own they could never afford that, right? So for the society to do that, it's a big deal, and that creates that ownership. The other part is they really connect with their guys. They become their guys. We don't believe in the hands-off approach. We get involved, and you develop relationships with people, and we teach them to develop relationships with each other, with the community, and then ultimately, write the letters and make the phone calls and connect with your family and take responsibility and be involved in the change. And like we believe in abstinence. You got to get clean. You got to stop that damage to get to that spot. And by the time they're done, it's a 180-degree turnaround.
I noticed, Dave, that one of the comments I heard from one of the clients that I spoke to, he said that his sponsor is his best friend. That's amazing. That to me, because you would think a sponsor is somebody that you talk to, but you don't really want to tell him everything. You're supposed to, I know, but there's things that you're hiding back because of anxiety, because of your own self-esteem issues that you have. But yet, that was his best friend. That's amazing. That's wonderful.
Well, it's intimate. One of the things that happens in addiction is the intimacy in your life is based in pain and conflict. It's pretty intimate to be in pain. In recovery, you want to switch that to where that intimacy becomes about honesty and friendship and family, and you can say, like, I love you to somebody, and, you know, put your heart in it, and just day by day do your best. And, you know, like, doing your best is a spiritual principle, but attainable spiritual principles, not stuff that's so far out there you can't reach it. Like, be nice, get along, make friends, you know, contribute to the atmosphere, you know.
Why do you keep doing it, Dave?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm just moved to do it. I love doing it.
And what is that? What do you look at? I mean, don't you get discouraged? I mean, obviously you don't have a 100% success rate, and I don't really care what the success rate is. I just see how many people have told me that this is the best place they've ever been to. What makes you keep going?
Well, that it works. You know, it really works. Like, and personally for me too, I've been in recovery for 30 years now, and you know, helping somebody, you know, became part of it for me. And then, you know, okay, professionally and business-wise, that part's there. But like you say, we're not on the clock here. Nobody that works here is on the clock. They're invested in this. You know, like I mean, I hire a cook. I tell him, I'll hire you. You've got to save me so much money that it costs me nothing to have you. And he puts his energy in. But the other part is, I said, if you want to be a cook here, you have to learn to be a counselor. There's a lot of conversations happening in that kitchen. If it's a run to the dump, the guy in the truck is having the conversation. I think it takes 10,000 conversations to bring you back to sanity, because in addiction, you go crazy. And it isn't have to change somebody's mind to be restored to sanity. You have to, day by day, put in the work to feel better, to think clearer. And then, you know, being restored to sanity is definable, you know, like, and with confidence and common sense. And, like I said in the beginning, dignity, integrity, morality. You remove one of those, like honest, open-minded, willing. You remove one of those and recovery doesn't work. You don't do the dishes, this whole place don't work. So my dishwasher's an important guy, you know what I mean?
You know, we always look at the word hope as being a very strong incentive for addicts, because if they relapse especially, there's always hope at the other end all the time. Do you teach hope, or is that something that they naturally get as part of the process?
It's definable. You know, it's definable in the environment in the sense that as soon as you feel a little bit better, it starts happening. As soon as you learn the language and get the confidence that goes with it, you know, for parents especially, you know, one day I drove home, I'm in front of my own house, I don't want to go in there because I'm going to have another fight with my kids. My kids are living in addiction. It's taking me apart. And, you know, the difference from that to my kids in recovery, my daughter stops by to tell me she loves me and gives me a pie. You know, that we, you know, listen to the same music. We hang out. We have this relationship. And addiction is so anti-relationship. The relationships become needy and dependent and about money and yelling and fighting. And you literally go crazy when your kids are loaded. You know, and so my kids got clean. I changed my life again. But while I was in it, I had support. I talked to people, and there was help available. You know, and the community again. When one of my daughters needed help, she came to this community. So it's pretty good. Right?
It's amazing, because I have not seen a recovery center that really depends on the community. Most of the communities are not very happy when there is a addiction center. You are a recovery center, and they seem to want to be a little apart because they're worried about the stealing and all the kind of stuff that goes with addiction. But yet you embrace it. You say that this community is a key part of the system, that why the last door is successful.
This is not about addiction, it's about recovery.
Right.
My guys will shovel snow, rake leaves, do stuff. If any of the churches in the community help, we're there. We do it for them. And the mayor phones up, I need something done. We go do it. We have relationships. They know what we're doing. There's no secret behind door number 3, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that. So we're involved in the community. You know,
wow.
Yeah.
I can only say to our audience around the world that this is an awakening for me. It's something that has been very difficult trying to understand addiction, the control, the cure, the cause, all of those issues, they're something that some of us who have not had any experience with addiction don't understand. But it has become such a prevalent piece of our society that Dave's work here in New Westminster and Vancouver is essential and could be a program that we could use around the country. And I think a model for addiction recovery centers. Dave, I want to thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I have learned so much from you in just 1 hour. I wish we had more time, and maybe we'll do a follow-up interview if I can come up here, or if I can convince you to open up a center in Hawaii. Now, you know, that might be a little far for you, but you never know.
Just my arm.
Yeah, I just might have. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Next week we have an excellent show. Our guests, we'll have 3 guests next week. It's going to be from Kids Hurt Too, which is a program that I'm involved in, which is called You Are in Charge. It's the foster care program where we have over 400 kids in the state of Hawaii. We are actually going to have the executive director, Cynthia Hero, who's one of the program directors, and James Labrie, who I think will be an inspiration to every single person in the world. Here is a young man who has been in foster care almost all of his life, and he has a better attitude about life than you or me together. So I hope I see you next week. This is Seymour Kazimirski from Seymour's World in Vancouver, Canada. Thank you.